Croesus has been recently nerfed. The quantities of common drops have been reduced, and more importantly for everyone doing this boss in public encounters, it now requires substantially higher contribution scores to get more drop piles, and therefore more chances for rare drops. So, having done this boss enough to get a few rare drops myself, and having done some 4-mans, I figure it's a better time than ever to give you all some pointers on how to get the highest contribution scores, and how to Croesus properly by being an upstanding member of society, aka just a good teammate. Good day everybody, and welcome. This video is timestamped, first of all, so if you've already got experience at Croesus and want to skip to tips for specific parts, or for tips on how to 4-man, feel free to skip around. Otherwise, if you're fairly new to Croesus, stay right here. Croesus is arguably the most unique boss in RuneScape, being that there are many mechanics and actions involved that rely on a team of players, all without any combat and only skilling. It can be a lot to learn all at once if you're just getting into it, and since the nerf, it seems to me like public instances have gotten much worse. Most times that I go now, there's literally no one there, and there's no instance alive, even. And when I do manage to find an instance, it seems like players are just doing way worse than before the nerf for some reason. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to put out this guide now. Let me start with a quick rundown of how this boss goes. Firstly, to even get started in a public instance that actually has players, go to the Croesus gate in World 68, the group bossing world. Croesus is all the way at the east end of Sentiston, if you haven't been there before. You don't take any HP damage at this boss, so all deaths are safe because of that, and instead you take damage to your stats from the mechanics. You have a purple health bar that goes down when you take damage, and when this purple bar gets all the way down from too much stats damage, you'll be taken out of the encounter, and you'll have to wait until the next round to get any drops. Healing this purple bar is done by drinking Super Restores, which also recover your damage stats. The encounter starts with players situated at one of the 4 corners of the map from which fungus can be gathered from large corpses using hunter, woodcutting, mining, or fishing. So in the beginning phase of the encounter, players gather fungus from these spots. An important note here is that the gathering node with the sparkly particles gives more skill experience and a higher contribution score. One of the other nodes will be normal, and one discolored one will be rotted. Do not gather from that one, and be careful as the positions of these nodes change sometimes. Once enough is gathered off the nodes of the large corpse, no more fungus will be available, and you'll have to gather more fungus from the various dead guards nearby. Next, players need to run these gathered fungi to the statues in the other corners of the arena. Each corner has a statue that requires 15 each of 2 types of fungi to be prepped for restoration. It's easy to remember which statues require which fungi by remembering that the fungus from each gathering corner is used for the statues of the next 2 corners moving counterclockwise when you're looking at the map with north being up at 12 o'clock like this. So, for example, fungus gathered from the hunting spot is used to repair the statue in the woodcutting and mining corners. You'll hear players call the closer statue short or running short when taking fungus to it, and running long means taking fungus to the statue farthest from the gathering spot. Traveling to the other statues is perilous, and there are 2 types of paths you'll have to traverse. The paths with fungus that you need to hop over are here, and to get through you just need to hop over the fungi spots that have these sparkling particles above them. If you hop over the other ones, you'll get damaged. The other routes are located here and are like fungus minefields. You need to navigate across these areas without stepping on any of the fungus, otherwise your stats will take a lot of damage, and one of your gathered fungi will be rotted for each fungal spot that you stepped on. You can surge or dive, bladed dive through these, just be very careful to not surge yourself into a fungus when you're doing that. Once enough fungus has been brought to a statue, it can be restored. This grants construction experience and goes faster the more players are repairing it. Finally, once a statue is restored, it can be prayed to awaken it, which will open Croesus' core for a set time per statue. Be very careful not to pray at any statues before the energy fungus mechanic appears. If you don't know what that means yet, I'll explain in a bit. The core of Croesus is actually a gathering spot, and will be randomly one of the 4 gathering skills used here, which again are hunter, woodcutting, fishing, or mining. All players at this point can gather from the core, which will damage Croesus. You will see occasional green or white particles come out of the core. Click the core again when you see these, as you get more contribution points and deal extra damage to Croesus. Be careful though, because red particles will also appear sometimes, It's okay to stay gathering at the core, but do not click it again when you see red particles because this will hurt your contribution score and heal Croesus. Just wait until the red particles go away before you click the core again. And that's it from a high level. Once Croesus is defeated, you can run back to Gorvek by the entrance and claim loot from the chest, or run back to a gathering spot and wait for the next encounter. All of this by itself would make Croesus an easy boss, very easy boss, but throughout the fight, Croesus throws out several different mechanics into the arena that damage your stats and slow you down. I'm not going to get too much into detail about these in this video, to be honest. The idea is the same for most of them. Just don't get hit, move if you do, and drink super restores to recover as needed. I feel like there are plenty of other guides out there already at this point for Croesus' specific mechanics, and what I really want to do is start you off with some tips that you really need to know to get the best contribution scores and to be a good team player. Because it often only takes one person messing things up to make a fight very difficult or a failure. And these types of tips will help you more than trying to remember what each Croesus mechanic does. You'll learn them naturally as you play through. So, tip number 1, always gather and carry at least 16 fungi to the statues. Please, please always get 16. This is the number one thing that messes up encounters in public instances. The statues in the arena require 15 of a fungus to be restorable, so you should always carry 16 to have enough to fully contribute to one statue, plus one extra in case you get hit by a mechanic that rots your fungus. Many players in public instances will run less, especially if the gathering area is very crowded, because you get a lot of contribution points for adding fungus to a statue. And if other players beat you to it, then you miss out on that. But what happens often is that multiple players will only gather like 5 and then run off, and often this leads to statues being incomplete by the time everyone else is ready to repair them. Remember that you can also get contribution points just for gathering from the nodes as well. Gathering only like 5 or 10 fungi and then running off to contribute to a statue is not really much better than gathering 16 or more and then running later to the statues. And by the way, if anybody knows for sure, please correct me on this, but I think gathering from the guards as well gives you contribution points. Gathering from the large corpses for sure gives you a lot. I think gathering from the guards gives you contribution points too. If anybody knows otherwise, please correct me on that. Remember also that if everyone runs off before you, you can also rot fungus yourself by clicking on it in your inventory and apply 10 rotted fungus to a depleted creature node to poison it, which also grants a chunk of contribution score, 20 contribution points to be exact. The point is not to think that you're screwed on contribution points if you're not the first one to run and deliver fungus to the statues. You can only screw yourself and the whole team by not running enough fungus. Number 2, pray after the energy fungus. The second most frustrating thing that can happen in an encounter, or maybe most frustrating depending on the players, is when someone prays at a restored statue before the energy fungus mechanic occurs. All of Croesus' mechanics have a set time at which they fire off. The most important of these for your contribution score is the energy fungus, which happens exactly 2 minutes and 25 seconds into the fight. At each corner near Croesus' base, an energy fungus will appear with a blue bar that runs down. Players need to click the energy fungus and start removing it before the blue bar goes all the way down. The important thing here is that each tick you spend on the energy fungus removing it grants you 5 contribution points. This is by far the biggest chunk of points you can get in the entire fight, so it is critical not to miss this for you and the entire team. Praying at a statue before this happens will open up Croesus' core and delay the energy fungus. All of Croesus' mechanics are put on pause while the core is open, so all players will have to make sure not to pray at any more statues and wait for the core to close so the energy fungus can appear. If this does happen and someone prays early, in this case, me, on accident in this instant that you're watching, it is best to just go to the core and DPS it as much as you can before it closes.
Crawl and die.
Make sure nobody else prays at any other statues in the meantime, and then just wait for the energy fungus to appear after the core is closed again, and then pray at the rest of the statues. Yeah, this can happen. This was a misclick. I was trying to restore the statue, and I ended up accidentally praying at it. Be careful that this doesn't happen to you because people will be angry. When this type of early praying does happen, it's typically that a mistake or a bot gone rogue, or a brand new player that hasn't done this before. It is really frustrating and it'll be very tempting, but honestly it just won't help to get pissed and rip the player a new one. Typically the other players in the arena will go boo, WTF, no praying, no pray before fungus, whatever, you jackass. Then the person says, okay, my bad, all good next time. And yeah, that's the best I can go. Number 3, bring something to burn the sticky fungus mechanic. Croesus uses this mechanic once before the energy fungus and also uses it at the same time when the energy fungus spawns. This really sucks since each tick of time is precious while the energy fungus is up, so you need to make sure you can burn it away quickly if it spawns on you. If you don't or can't, it will trap you in place for a while and deal damage to all your stats a few times before disappearing. So you have a few options for burning this away. The worst is bringing regular logs in your inventory, and slightly better than that is bringing protean logs because they stack. And the best options are equipping either an Orphan Furnace core, which takes some time and effort and high-level smithing and archaeology to craft, and crafting too, I think, but the Orphan Furnace core acts as free logs for burning away the sticky fungus. And lastly, Sana's Fire Torch is best because it also acts as infinite logs for sticky fungus burning, but it also has a good chance of getting you double fungus from the woodcutting spot if you hang out there. If none of these are available or preferable options, then know that the timber fungus from the woodcutting spot can also be used to burn away sticky fungus. Number 4, don't stand around doing nothing at any point. Very often, when the running of fungus to statues and repairing is done fairly quickly and things are moving smoothly, players will stand around the statues waiting for the energy fungus to appear. You can still get contribution points after the statues are repaired. If you have a good amount of time left before the fungus spawns, you can run to the resource nodes nearby and continue gathering. Again, please correct me if I'm wrong that the guards give you contribution points also, and this will take you a number of runs to get comfortable with, but if you find yourself with a minute or even like 40 seconds before the energy fungus comes and you've got nothing to do and you're willing to sweat a little bit more, look around to see if other statues still need repairing. Or even easier, if you have 10 fungus parts, look around and see if any of the other gathering nodes still need rotting. The only way to know if they need rotting is by the blue bar above the gathering nodes getting really full compared to other bars at the nodes that were rotted, which barely fill up. You can try to make a run for it and rot any nodes you see before someone else gets to it. Number 5, my last tip, is just try to learn to not get hit by Croesus' mechanics and don't do actions that remove contribution points. Specifically, this happens when you gather from the rotted nodes at a gathering spot and when you click on Croesus' core when the red particles are up. Everything else will not remove contribution points, but various mechanics rot your fungus, and all of them will take super restore doses to fix. The less you need to heal, the longer you can stick around. So these are all my big public encounter tips. I hope this helps and keeps it simple enough to get better with your Croesus runs. It is a complicated boss to get into, and it can be hard to digest long, complicated guides as you're starting. My last brief tips are just a rundown of how 4-man encounters go. I've only done a few of these, full disclosure, mainly because they're much more intensive and there is very little margin for error compared to public encounters. On the flip side, the major advantage to 4-man encounters is that your chance of getting a rare drop will be consistently double that of your odds in a public encounter. Maybe even triple now with the nerf to contribution point thresholds. And speaking of the nerf in question, the only downside now of 4-man encounters is that because you are guaranteed pretty much to have a contribution score of over 419, you will not get any common drops. This is because with the nerf, you will only get rolls for the rare drops at the highest contribution point thresholds. So if common drops from Croesus are important to you for steady money making or because you play as an iron, it's worth thinking about whether you want to do 4-man teams with no common drops but better rare chances, or just stick to publics for the common drops too and just a lesser chance at the rares. The easiest way to find a 4-man team is by joining the friend chat Croesus FC or Croesus FC1 if that's full. And okay, so what's different about running a 4-man team? Mainly that you're doing a lot more work than you would in public instances. Here's the basic strategy. Each person starts in one of the 4 gathering corners in roles predetermined by you in the team so that you can gear up specifically for each gathering spot and get the best boosts possible. You gather 16 of the fungus at your spot and deposit all that in the box next to the statue at your spot. You then gather 16 more fungus for yourself to run. Also, before you leave the spot, you gather an additional 10 fungus to rot your gathering node. For 4-mans, rotting is critical because otherwise these encounters take longer time, so you don't want the gathering spots to fill back up. Now, once you have deposited 16 fungus and rotted your node and have 16 more fungus, you will run short. This means running to the next statue over, counterclockwise from you. Add your fungus to the statue there, then collect the 16 fungus that another player should have left in the box. Take this fungus and run short again to the next statue. Add the fungus to that, and once each of the other 3 players have all done this, you will be able to repair a statue and then pray at all 4 and take down Croesus' core. There is one important note about 4-man teams regarding energy fungus, aka your main source of contribution points. Because these encounters take much longer than public ones, you will likely be right in the middle of gathering or something by the time the fungus comes at 2 minutes 25 seconds in. So it's important to not forget about the energy fungus mechanic when the time comes, and it is nice to remind your teammates in the chat too when the time comes. Furthermore, these encounters take long enough typically for the energy fungus mechanic to pop off twice. A good team will remind each other via chat, like I said, when the fungus is about to appear, just to remind everybody, and it's good to do the same when you're paying attention to the timer. As I said, 4-mans are more intensive with less room for error and less fun than a public instance in my opinion, but you might feel differently. They're definitely much more engaging and keep you on your toes more than a public encounter, so some players might enjoy it more. Alright, that's all I've got. There are a lot of other things I could cover with a boss like Croesus, but I wanted to keep this to the most important tips that I can think of, both for total newbies and experienced players that you might not have thought about. Thank you very much for watching my guide. I really appreciate you for that. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see other helpful guides like this, please consider liking this video and subscribing. I'll catch you in the next one.